The viewpoints expressed on Night Fright are not necessarily those of the host, the staff, the sponsors, or the affiliate stations. Tonight's program may contain graphic themes or images. Viewer discretion is advised.
There is a time for question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Showtime, welcome to the show. I'm Brent Holland, and welcome one and all to Night Fright. Get the coffee going, get the tea going, get a beverage of your choice going. Great show tonight. Jim DiEugenio is returning tonight, folks. Wow. I know. He's great. He's fantastic. Let me read a little bit about Jim.
Can I what?
I'm just going to read a little bit about your bio.
Oh, okay. You're going to give me a blurb?
I'm going to give you a blurb. Jim DiEugenio, just maybe the most knowledgeable person on the planet when it comes to the JFK assassination. Jim has the extraordinary ability to name names and dates at the drop of a hat. Jim and fellow researcher Lisa Pease published Probe magazine. Now, Probe magazine, folks, was a series of articles dedicated to all of the assassinations in the 60s. JFK, Malcolm, Dr. King, and Bobby. Along with Lisa, who I've had the distinct honor of interviewing as well on Night Fright, Jim published a book hailed by Oliver Stone called The Assassinations. Never, ever, ever debate Jim on this subject matter with any expectations of winning, because you won't. He is that good. He is driven, as all researchers are, by passion and desire for the truth. Two of the greatest American qualities. Jim's introduction to the JFK assassination came from an interview with New Orleans DA Jim Garrison, and that interview was done for Playboy magazine in October 1967. Now, Jim didn't read that until a decade later in 1977. Now, Jim swears, folks, up and down that his motivation for the purchase of this Playboy magazine was strictly for the article. And who am I to doubt him? Now, in all honesty, folks, when I was a teenager, if I bought Playboy magazine, it wasn't for the articles. Okay, if you listen to or read anything Jim does, you will learn details. He has never failed to reveal aspects of the assassination that have never been considered associated with each other. He takes an aspect and not only has the ability to turn it upside down, but he turns it inside out as well. It's no wonder Oliver Stone sought him out for his research expertise and to add his proficiency to the JFK DVD. It's my great pleasure to welcome all the way from LA, where it's as balmy as it is there as it is in Kingston today, because, Jim, we are well above normal temperatures. I was just telling the folks, right now we're around 45, 47 degrees when we should be down around 20 Fahrenheit. Maybe even less. It's my great pleasure to welcome Jim DiEugenio back to the show. Welcome back, my friend.
Okay. Thank you, Brent. But in that introduction, my last two books,
yes,
which were published after the assassinations, which I co-edited with Lisa Pease, were the second edition of Destiny Betrayed in 2012, I think, and then Reclaiming Parkland in 2013. The Reclaiming Parkland is being reissued as a trade paperback in the fall of this year, and Oliver Stone is going to do a brand new prologue, for the book, okay, which he called me up and told me about, that he'd be more than happy to do that for me. Okay.
So just how close are you and Oliver, just to give folks
well, I was at his office yesterday.
That's pretty close, I'd say. Now, Now, we just mentioned Christmas. What did he give you for Christmas so far? Don't tell me a lump of coal.
Well, if he does this introduction for me, I'll be happy.
No
Okay.
kidding.
You
No
know.
kidding.
Let's see. That's a really interesting story about, and I really don't tell it all that much about running into the Jim Garrison interview about 9 or 10 years after it was published. Okay. And because I had kind of written this stuff all off, okay, around that time, because Garrison got buried in the press. I really didn't know what the heck to think of him. The House Select Committee had replaced Sprague and Tannenbaum with, cover-up guy Blakey, and I really didn't know what to think about this thing. So I said, well, I want to take a look at what this guy really has to say, unfiltered, by the media or the TV or anything like that. Let's just hear him talk on his own. And I'll never forget bringing that home and reading it. And it was the longest interview that Playboy ever did. Okay, it was the longest, and it went on for pages and pages and pages. And I remember reading it by about 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay, it's that long, and I read it all the way through. And I guess what's the best way to explain the way I felt? Okay, the great British theater critic William Hazlitt said that watching Keane play Hamlet was like reading Shakespeare by lightning. Okay, and that's kind of the feeling I got. And I remember at the end of the year, I go, this guy got a raw deal. I mean, he makes a hell of a lot more sense than the Warren Commission does. Okay, because I had read the Warren Report. Okay, I didn't think it was very, compelling. So I read this guy, and I go, because in that interview, what he did, he was the first guy speaking to a wide audience that proposed a credible alternative to what the Warren Report said had happened. Okay, and he brought in all these fascinating elements about, the anti-Castro Cuban exiles, and about Guy Bannister, and about 544 Camp Street, and about Oswald not being what he was presented as, and just how bad the CIA really was, and how the Warren Report simply had no credibility, and he brought in all these elements, and he did it in a very logical and cohesive way. And so from then on, I read a few other books after that, and
Would you read, Jim?
Well, okay, I read things like Inquest, okay, Edward Epstein's book, okay, which is a critique of the Warren Report. Okay, I read what is still a very, very good book, Sylvia Maher's book, Accessories After the Fact, okay, and I read Thompson's book, 6 Seconds in Dallas,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that was my general background. All right, now I will say this though. There's only 2 other times I ever felt in my whole research life the way I did when I read the Garrison interview. The first time after that was when I read Philip Melanson's Spy Saga, which really, really, in 200 pages, kind of cracked open the whole mystery of Oswald to an extent that nobody had ever done before. Okay. And then the other time was when I read Richard Mahoney's book, JFK Ordeal in Africa, in which that book convinced me in the way that Garrison did on the Kennedy case that there was a huge cover-up of who Kennedy really was. Okay? I mean, in some ways, just as bad as a cover-up about the circumstances of his death. Because when I read JFK Ordeal in Africa, I said to myself, why has this all been kept secret all these years? Mm-hmm. Why did they not want us to know just to the extreme measures that Kennedy was going to go to in the third world to block European imperialism, even if it was by his own allies? In this case, England and the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Excuse me, England and Belgium. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the feeling I had reading that book. So those are the three times in my life where I kind of felt like I had just been slapped across the face, and said, "Boy, are you stupid?" That's the kind of feeling I had reading those things. You know,
Well, absolutely. His foreign policy was a big part of why he was murdered, I feel,
yeah.
because
But
he.
what Mahoney did, and what his successors have done, who are Robert Rakove from Stanford and Philip Muhlenbeck from Georgetown,
Mhm.
they've gone way beyond, okay, what Garrison was thinking of. And I don't know if you saw my. Oh, did you see my presentation in Dallas on this?
2 years ago or 3 years
Yeah,
ago?
2 years
2013?
at the anniversary.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
What I did there is I said, I'm going to do something revolutionary. I'm going to give you a 1 hour talk on JFK's foreign policy, and I'm never going to go into Vietnam or Cuba.
Yeah.
Okay? And most people would think that what else are you going to talk about then? Well, it turns out there's a hell of a lot to talk about besides that. Okay? But it had all been hidden by all these, these terrible writers like Robert Dallek and Richard Reeves, who have given us these really crappy books, on who Kennedy really was. And it's like JFK in the third world never existed, like Africa and the Middle East, etc., and which, unfortunately for them, Kennedy really, really was interested in those places. And Ben Bradley, his false friend, who once said that Kennedy's forte wasn't foreign policy, well, that either he was not very smart, Kennedy completely duped him, or he's a liar. Okay, because Kennedy was the most visionary foreign policy president since Roosevelt. Okay, and if you ask me, there ain't nobody in second place.
No, I agree, and
And
there was hints of that in his speeches as well. Well, more than hints, they were
Yeah.
outright bold statements. How he was going to go into the developing countries, and
Right.
no more diplomacy by gunships. That was it. It was over.
Mhm.
And they were, he was going to build schools. He was going to build infrastructure. I think a very good black and white example of that is the Peace Corps. I mean,
Right.
what a wonderful idea! What a
And also the
fantastic-
Alliance for Progress too.
There you go.
That would be another good example. Right.
I'm going to stay in the JFK realm just for a second, Jim, and something I requested that we address tonight, and that is I've been getting flooded about James Files, about
Why?
his story.
Why?
I don't know. I can't explain it. I thought this was something that was over, it was debunked, and it was done. I was wondering if you could give us your perspective of the whole James Files story.
Well, I kind of agree with you what you just said, but just in order to, if there's some people, I always get talked about Files and Judith Baker, and I do not take either one of them seriously. Okay, now the Files began. I don't know if you've gone over this, but Files began with a guy named Joe West. Okay, Joe West was a private investigator down in Texas. Now, Joe West, in addition to Files, is responsible for the whole Ricky White morass, which was another disaster for the research community, in which, I don't know if, should I go into this?
Sure, please do. Yeah,
Okay,
please do.
all right.
Because I want to, like an exorcist would do, I want to get this out there and dealt with and move on from it.
Ricky White was the brother of policeman Roscoe White. And he said he dug up some canister or something in which Roscoe White's diary about his role in the Kennedy assassination and the cleanup operation was now exposed. Well, it turned out that this was all phony, that it was all manufactured, and that it was done in conjunction with a corporation in order to sell to Oliver Stone in the making of his movie JFK. All right, and there's a very good expose of this it's called I Am Mandarin, and it's at Texas Monthly, and you don't have to go into their archives to get it. You can get it for free. Well, Joe West is the guy who had a prime role in calling that press conference, down in Texas, which actually got media play, and and it ended up completely with blood splatter all over the research community because it was a hoax. All right, so then Joe West then hears from a guy named Zach Shelton, who I think was an FBI agent, and this case he worked on with, by the way, you know that's not his real name?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't know this.
Yeah, it's not his real name is Sutton.
Oh.
Okay, all right. And so what Joe West then was snookered into this Files guy who had been in jail for attempting to killing 2 police officers. Okay, all right. So now, to understand this fully, at the same time that Shelton is tipping off West, all right, there's a guy named Rademacher down in Dallas who, for some reason, decides to start digging into the ground, okay, and he says that he has come up with 2 shells, okay, all right, and these were originally they were reported as as 221 caliber 221 shells. That's how they originally reported, and he says that he found 2 of them. Okay, so at Jim Mars, everybody knows who Jim Mars is, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, he has his class down there in Texas, I think at UT Arlington. Okay, and so one night, West comes in with Rademacher, okay, all right, and introduces this so-called evidence. He then goes to see Files. See, what's important about this is the sequence, because he had hooked up with Rademacher before he went to see Files, all right? And then, of course, what happens is that Files now claims that he shot this this fancy fireball pistol, and that, well, there was a little problem right here, because the fireball does not accept 221 caliber, it takes 222s. So Rademacher, from what I read, Rademacher traced over the 1 with a 2, okay, so that the calibers would match, okay, all right. Now, Joe West passed away, and this whole thing was picked up by a music producer named Bob Vernon, okay, all right, and I actually have some experience with Bob because he called me up one night, he flew into LA, and he gave me the whole presentation, okay? He was looking for backers and investors. Well, I decided not to bite for, as we'll see, for obvious reasons. So Vernon decides to take the bullet to a forensic doctor, okay, a guy named Stimson, all right? And he says that Stimson said that they were teeth marks. But Stimson later told somebody else, well, I didn't really say that. I said that there could be a number of reasons for the indentation, okay? I mean, a squirrel could have bitten the thing, all right? Okay, you know, but the thing is, he would not give me a dental cast from his client, Sutton or Files, whatever you want to call him. Okay? Now, I would like to ask him a rhetorical question. If Files really did bite that shell, don't you think he'd be screaming at the top of his lungs to say, please take it here, put it in my mouth. Okay.
Proof positive that I was the guy. Here we go.
Right. Okay, he'd be jumping for joy.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, to my knowledge, that never happened. All right. Now, there's a couple of other problems with, I mean, first of all, the idea that Johnny Rosselli is going to be on the ground in Dallas supervising the hit is just so ludicrous, I don't even want to think about it, you know? I mean, that is just preposterous, okay? I mean, they don't work that way. The mob doesn't work that way. The CIA doesn't work that way. Because you don't want one of your upper-level middle guys caught because he can spill the beans on everything, okay? You know? All right? So that was the idea that this low-level hitman met both Oswald and Ruby. before the assassination. That's really good planning, isn't it? Okay, that this guy, you introduced a hitman to both the patsy, okay, and the guy who's going to rub him out. Okay, I mean
I equate that with Oswald making his grand escape on a bus.
I mean, it just doesn't work that way in the real world. Okay, all right. That somehow the CIA wanted to call off the hit, but the mob overruled the CIA. No, that doesn't happen in the real world either. Okay. Now, finally, if you want to see what I think is the coup de grace on this, there's a very good researcher by the name of Alan Eaglesham, who has a website called Manuscript Service. And he did a very long and detailed comparison of the so-called shells that Rademacher dug up. And he has proved pretty much conclusively that these shells were not manufactured before 1971 because they changed the design on the shells after 1971. Okay, and he does a side-by-side comparison showing you that these shells were manufactured after 1971. So that's what I think of the whole Jim Files thing.
So there was this whole thing where apparently, from what I was reading as well, that he claims to have had a twin brother that he went and killed or something. Can you tell that aspect
of it? I
just
don't want to talk about that one. Somehow, either his wife or the detective agency came up with evidence that he was actually in Chicago on the day of the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And and he denied it and said that he had a twin brother who was actually there. And the detective agency looked into this and said they interviewed his wife, and his wife said he didn't have a twin brother. Okay. Look, I don't know how much dirt you want to put on the corpse. Okay. But to me, it's just, I mean, this is sort of like the latest hoax by the moon landing people. Have you heard about this one?
Well, tell us that one too then. Go ahead.
Oh, you didn't hear about this?
No, but I know Independence Day 2 is coming up, and I'm looking forward to seeing the movie.
Stanley
Kubrick. Yes, go ahead. Tell everything.
Stanley Kubrick secretly directed the whole moon landing thing, okay? And so he confessed about this the year that he died, 1999, and somehow it just surfaced in 2015. The problem is that, number one, the guy doesn't look like Stanley Kubrick. And I've seen pictures of Kubrick in the last 2 or 3 years of his life. He doesn't look anything like this guy, okay? The guy has a huge, beard, and, and I think it's to cover up the fact that he didn't have any of that. He wouldn't look like Kubrick at all, okay? And then he was coached into this performance because they were dumb enough to leave some outtakes of it, and I think they called him Tom during the coaching, or something like that. Yeah.
And you can tell he's reading from a script when he's asking the questions to Kubrick as well. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So anyway, this is the kind of thing you get from the loonies, okay, or whatever you want to call them. In the Files case, I think that was not so much. I think that was about money.
Me too.
I think that was about money. Okay. Yeah. Well, and Bob Vernon did make money because he sold it to Wim Dankbar for something like $325,000. And Wim Dankbar bought a can of whatever you want to call it, a can of spoiled milk, if you ask me. Okay. But that actually implies that it was good at one time. So I guess we're going to call it, a can of moonshine. Okay. So so anyway, that's my take on the whole Jim Files thing. And I think it's not kosher, and I don't think we're spending a lot of time on it. Okay.
Okay, me either.
Very surprised that people are still calling you on. Well, maybe I shouldn't be, because there are some people like the Zach Shelton guy, the FBI agent who, he got a play produced in Chicago based upon this. Yeah, do you believe it? Yeah, look it up. Okay, wow. Kennedy assassination play in Chicago that actually played, I think, for over a month. Okay, and it's based upon this. Okay, so very, very, very surprising to me that serious people, actually, But see, that's what the Kennedy assassination has become. And this part of this is the thing that makes it a sideshow. Is crap like this.
I wanted to get that out there because I think a lot of it is a lot of novices now are coming to the JFK assassination and they're not sure. They hear all these rumors and they're not sure if a rumor is true or not, especially in the case of my show, because I get a lot of younger people listening to the show. It's a different demographic than Len's great show or Alan's great show as well. Those guys are experienced. The people who listen to those shows are more experienced and more knowledgeable by far. So what I try to do is introduce a lot of the different concepts, if you will, of the Kennedy assassination, but some I want to debunk right away so we don't end up sending younger people down the rabbit hole in the wrong direction. And thank you for that, Jim. The other thing I want to say is I had Story Musgrave on the show, folks. Renowned astronaut, NASA astronaut. We went to the moon. I hate to break it to you, we went to the moon. As much as people, I don't know why people don't want us to have been on the moon, but we were there. And
well, don't tell Jim Fetzer that, okay?
I promise. He'll say it was the Mossad. Anyways, moving right along.
The JFK Assassination, the definitive book by Brent, Holland. From inside the Oval Office to Dealey Plaza, first-person witness accounts. Order yours right now. nightfrightshow.com.
Jim DiEugenio is our guest tonight, and there's none better, folks. I mean, with the legacy that he brings and the truth he brings to the assassination, thank God we have a person of this stature amongst us. www.nightfrightshow. He's got a great book out called Reclaiming Parkland, which, we don't have to talk about him either, Bugliosi. I think he's been denounced enough and debunked enough, I hope by this point. Also, he's got some great articles, great books. All his connections, all his books will be on the www.nightfrightshow.com website. Click on tonight's guest book cover. It'll take you right to a place where you can buy all of his books. And these are musts. It's as simple as that. There's no if, and, or but. These are musts. You must have these books in your library if you want to be serious about studying the JFK assassination.
Let me say something about, you're saying you have a lot of younger listeners?
Yes, sir.
Okay. See, I'll never forget when Gerald Posner was making the rounds with his crappy book, okay, Case Closed.
Yeah.
And one of his first stops was an ABC special, and they did like a 20-minute segment with him. And they asked him, how long did you study the JFK case before you wrote the book? And he said, 3 years. And the host went, wow. I hate to tell you this. 3 years on the JFK case, to me, you won't even get a junior college diploma, okay? It takes at least, if you ask me seriously, it takes at least 10 years, okay, to even begin to fully comprehend the complexities of the JFK case, all right? Not because it's that hard to understand, but because it's been buried with so much disinformation, so much misinformation, so many people with agendas, so many people in denial, okay, so many provocateurs, okay, that it takes that long to weed yourself through this, this wooded area that has been, in addition to all the wild animals, and there's also landmines in there, okay, that you can blow yourself up on. Okay, so it takes a long time to really understand the whole Kennedy assassination case. Now, I will say this, though. Once you understand the JFK case, it really helps you understand other things that are going on in the world, number one, but it also helps you understand the other assassinations and scandals that have plagued the United States. Canada's a pretty great country. You really don't have all these problems up there, okay? But in the United States, well, the old joke about what's your definition of a Canadian? Do you ever hear that one?
I've heard many along that, but
Okay,
go ahead.
a Canadian is an American without a rifle but with health care. Okay, that's a good one, isn't
You
it?
got to tell that to Len. I guess Len knows that one.
Okay, all right. So anyway, hey, if it wasn't for the weather up there, I'd move up there.
Well,
Okay.
listen, I was mentioning before, we're having weird weather, Jim. We're up to 45, 47 degrees, and we
You know
should.
something? What it is tonight in California? It's
No.
53.
Oh my
It's cold
God.
tonight. Yeah. Well,
So
I shouldn't say that for you. That would be you'd be out there in Bermuda shorts if it was 50. Okay. But
we'd
for
be barbecuing.
California, that's cold. Okay.
Yeah,
You
no.
know.
So something's going on, and yet I've got a friend who's up in Reno, Nevada, and they've had like 3 feet of snow. Like they're in
What?
it. Oh yeah, they're plowed in and inundated, and he sent me photos, and I'm
It's
still in it.
unbelievable.
Oh,
Wow.
it's crazy. I don't know what's going on, but there's something going on, and
Okay.
yeah. So we'll see. That'll be the next conspiracy thing we'll take a look at, which is geoengineering of the.
There's
Planet.
already people talking about that, by the way. You know that, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Chemtrails
Yeah.
are a big thing. Are a big thing. Let's talk about that great article you wrote. The
Okay.
Dark
Yeah.
Truth and the
Let's
Movie
talk
Truth.
about that. Okay. And
Okay.
Mary Mapes. Okay. And
Yes.
and have you talked about this at all?
Not at all. That's why I wanted to have you on the show. I think
Okay.
this is pretty exclusive, folks. And wait till you hear this, because none better than Jim to bring the truth out in this
Mary
story.
Mapes was a CBS 60 Minutes producer who lived in Texas. Okay. And she had been working essentially TV. Her husband is a print reporter, but she had spent something like 15 years in TV reporting when she went from Seattle down to Dallas. She hooked up with the local CBS station, and then she got up on the network. All right, and she had worked with Dan Rather a lot, not exclusively. Okay, but she had done some very good stories. Okay, for instance, everyone knows that the late Strom, was it Strom Thurmond? Yeah, I think it
It
was.
was. Yes, it was.
Okay, yeah. He was a segregationist,
Hmm.
racist he was. Well, it turned out that he had an affair with a black woman, okay, and covered this up. And Mary heard about this and tracked her down. Okay, so talk about hypocrisy.
Yeah,
All right,
complete.
and okay, and then she had also done an expose on Abu Ghraib. CBS, on contrary to what Seymour Hersh might think, CBS really had the first expose about the torture practices going on at Abu Ghraib prison. Okay, now, this is a setup because after the Abu Ghraib story broke, 60 Minutes split up into a 60 Minutes original and a 60 Minutes 2. Okay, the original, of course, was on the weekend. 60 Minutes 2 was on during the week. So they recruited her as a producer to 60 Minutes 2. And she essentially, coming off that great story, they offered her to go ahead and give them ideas, and then they would go ahead and do it. They would go ahead and commission it. So, well, she goes, there's been a long time story saying that George Bush might have gone AWOL during his National Guard service. And this is something that's been pretty much covered up by his handlers, Karl Rove, etc. All right. In fact, they don't even want to talk about it, and they discourage any reporters like Jim Moore, who was a very good reporter down in Texas, from bringing up the whole issue. Okay. And I just might think that this is true. All right. And so I think we should do a story on it, okay, because it had been covered up in 2000, completely covered up. Even though the Boston Globe, as I wrote in my review for Bob Perry Consortium, and I have a link to that story in that review, okay, a guy named Walter Thompson, I think his name was Walter Thompson, okay, wrote a story about this in 2000, and nobody, okay, looked into it. When it should have been front page, because this is what Mary was saying, and I agree with her.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't the American people have a chance to debate whether or not they want a president who deliberately avoided fulfilling his, I think, 5-year obligation to his country, okay? And in fact, nobody can really find out what the heck the guy did for the last year and a half, because nobody in Texas and nobody in Alabama, where he was transferred to, remember seeing him. And from what she said, and what other writers like Russell Baker said, they didn't even want him back in Texas. But let me explain that. Because he requested 2 leaves of absences for 2 political races. Okay, the second one was in Alabama for a guy named Win Blount.
Mm-hmm.
But he had agreed to show up at the base there. Okay, nobody remembered him. Okay, when this Walter guy from the Boston Globe went down and interviewed the officers at that time, they said, no, I never remember seeing the guy report for anything once he was in Alabama. All right. Okay, and so when the guys in Texas heard about this, okay, they decided that we don't want you back. Okay, if you did something like that, we don't want you back in Texas. So George Bush essentially did not perform what his contractual duty was as a soldier. Well, in his case, he was supposed to be a pilot, all right, except he didn't fly very much, all right. It turned out that he didn't want to fly, and after flying some flights, which he did okay on, he didn't want to do it later. And so this has led some people to believe the rumors about Bush's drug and alcohol problems at that time, okay? And so, and I think is justified, okay?
If it's Oliver, go ahead and take it, Jim.
I can take it? Okay. Just a minute.
Just drop my name to him if it's Oliver. Speaking with Jim DiEugenio tonight, folks, and he's talked about James Files and all kinds of great stuff tonight, and we're going to continue in just a few seconds. www.nightfrightshow.com. You can click on the book link there, and that'll take you right to a spot where you can buy his books, and they are numerous. You could get The Assassinations, co-authored with Lisa Pease, Reclaiming Parkland, and Destiny Betrayed, the new version of it. All great books and musts, without a question. Right now we're talking about a cover-up that took place about George Bush's service. And Jim's just coming back from a phone call with Oliver Stone where he dropped my name, and apparently I'm doing the next score for Oliver Stone's film. And thank you, Jim, for that.
Okay,
back
sure,
to Jim.
Brent. Sure, Brent.
Allow me my fantasies, okay?
I won't even charge you.
Okay, it's close to Christmas. Allow me my fan. It's all I have.
Okay, fine. Okay. So anyway, this very intriguing story, as Mary said, should have been caused an intense debate, about whether or not we want a guy like that running the country, because what will happen if America gets into a very tense situation, with a guy who thought he was above, performing his military duty. And by the way, the unit that Bush got into was nicknamed the Champagne Unit, because it was the unit in which all the very wealthy, and well-off people in Texas sent their sons and nephews to get into. Like the Conley family, the Lloyd Benson family, those were the people who got into this unit. So that's the kind of power Bush had, to get people, his father wielded, obviously, to get him into this special unit, knowing that he would not, let's put it this way. The Bush family was smart enough to know that in public they had to support the Vietnam War, but in private they understood this ain't worth risking your life over. Okay, so that's what they did. So this, of course, as Mary said, would have been a very important subject to debate. Is this the kind of president we want to have? Well, I remember in 2004 election, where one of the candidates was a guy named Wesley Clark, who had been a
General Wesley Clark, sure.
yeah. And so I'll never forget one of the early debates, Peter Jennings posed a question to him in which he said words to the effect, Mr. Clark, at one of your rallies, okay, you had Michael Moore speaking on the dais. And he essentially said that a race between you and President Bush would be the hero versus the deserter, meaning that he was saying that President Bush had left his troop and gone AWOL. Do you care to denounce these silly charges? And when I heard that, I'll never forget it. And Amy Goodman said the same thing. She goes, this was sort of a shot across the bow, meaning that the MSM was not going to let anybody get into this issue, okay, for the simple reason that they had completely missed it in 2000, and they didn't want to be humiliated about it now. Now, what's important about that is this is about the same time that Mary's show was about to go on, okay? Okay, this is just a couple months before, all right? And so the movie actually begins with that. It begins with, I don't even think we named about the movie. It's called Truth, with Robert Redford as Dan Rather, which I think is a really lousy title, but anyway. Because the name of her book was Truth and Duty. I think they should have stuck with that.
Agreed.
Okay? Because the duty, of course, is what Bush spurned. Okay? All right. And so anyway, the movie began with that. It began with, Mary in her office looking at the polling of the election, and what a close election it looked like it was going to be. Meaning, of course, that her story, okay, might have a very big impact on it. Okay, so the movie follows her going to the witnesses that she needed and running into this Burkett guy, who was played by veteran actor Stacy Keach, who did a very good job, I thought, in this minor role. All right, and I should add this because I didn't get to talk about it in the review. The movie was filmed in Australia.
Is that right? They had to go offshore.
Because Kate Blanchett lives there. Okay, the star of the movie, and she's essentially become the new Meryl Streep. Okay, a younger version, because she's sort of like her offbeat good looks combined with her very very. I think she's pretty good myself.
I think she's a great actress.
But I think she's a good actress. She has a lot of range and a lot of talent, okay, and a lot of, emotional commitment to her characters. And she did a good job here. But I'll have to tell you, I actually thought, and they cut this out of my review, I thought that Redford was even better. Redford, since the beginning of his career, has always been underrated as an actor, okay, because he was... there's this wonderful story when he was trying to...
Go ahead, if it's.
Okay, sorry.
This time you do have to drop my name. No, I'm kidding. Jim DiEugenio, folks, and he's being hounded by Oliver Stone because that's the way Jim rolls in L.A.
Okay.
He gets calls from Oliver Stone at all times of the night because Oliver can't live without him. That's what can I tell you? He relies on people. So
anyway, Redford, there's this wonderful story about when they were casting Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, all right, because they didn't want Redford in it. Newman had already committed to the project, so they were looking for like Steve McQueen to be opposite him. Yeah. And then they thought of Brando. Okay, well, Brando didn't have any interest in it. Okay, and Steve McQueen was giving them all kinds of problems about he demanded to have his name above Newman's. Okay, because he always had this rivalry with Paul Newman, okay? And so they weren't going to do that. We'll give you co-equal billing. We won't put you above him. So the director and the writer and Newman began to push for Redford. And the executives didn't want Redford. They go, look, he's another blonde beach boy. You throw a stick at Malibu, you hit 10 of them, okay? Now, that's stupid even for Hollywood, okay? But the thing is, Redford has always been a very low-key, subtle, solid actor, okay? And he doesn't get enough credit for what a good career he's had. I mean, he was terrific in The Natural. He was wonderful in The
Yes.
Candidate. Okay, he was really good in a very little-known sports movie called Downhill Racer, where he played a very kind of unattractive character. Okay, he was good in all those films. In this movie, I thought he was even better than good, because what he did in this movie is he portrayed a man who was essentially your corner grocery store owner, who had gone to a place in life that was way beyond him. And he did it. He played him as an everyman who just was a result of circumstances. And it was a really wonderfully etched performance, okay, which I don't think he got enough credit for, okay, you know. And so he was good. Kate Blanchett was good. Like I said, Stacy Keach was good. So it was a very well-acted movie. And a lot of the actors are from Australia, okay, because that's where they filmed the picture, all right? And the story essentially gets into what happened after. Because after the show was broadcast, I think in September, actually, by the way, before it was over, and this is a telltale sign, because
we've only got 5 minutes left. I just wanted to let you know.
Okay, very quickly then. The producer sent it to the White House. Okay, very bad mistake. Okay, and so what happened is, and I think this is true, Mary thinks, Karl Rove got out the word, okay, about the typewriter, the supposed typewriter discrepancy, that it was probably written on a word processor because some of the things you couldn't do on a typewriter. Well, it turned out that was all baloney, okay, because later on they proved that some of the documents that Bill Burkett had given them very well could have been done on an IBM Selectric at that time, all right? So that was all camouflage. And so what happened to her great story about Bush dodging his service in the National Guard went into this minutia about could you superscript a TH next to a 9, you know, on a word processor or a typewriter. It turns out that this has been proven now by a university professor, I think at Clemson, who showed with giant blow-ups of the documents that the imprint of the keys showed wear and tear, which you would not get with a computer.
With a computer.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so her career then went down the tubes because
the ramifications were far-reaching.
CBS wanted to get rid of the problem, so they put together this phony panel of lawyers, not journalists, lawyers, in which the clear intent was to find her guilty of irresponsibility. And so that's what they did. And the day that report came in, the president of CBS, okay, before he even gave her a chance to rebut it, called her up and said that she was canned, okay? And without any kind of, you know, chance to have her say, she was gone. And the story then was discredited, which it shouldn't have been. But that's the way, that's the way it works.
It works.
You know, unfortunately, that's the way the system works. Okay. Okay, so is that our 5 minutes?
Pretty close. Okay, Jim.
Okay. I'm getting all these phone calls, and I got to tell you, it's not because of Oliver. It's because of what happened in L.A. today. They called off the schools because of this terror threat.
Right.
Okay.
And what's your opinion, real quick, on that?
Well, they obviously had to do it.
Agreed.
Okay. Yeah, because there would have been a tremendous lawsuit if, they didn't do it and some kid got hurt. Okay. So I didn't have to go to work today.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I think they made the right choice, too. And do you practice lockdown? You're a professor, Jim, by the way. Do you practice lockdowns as well?
Do I practice what?
Lockdowns?
No.
Oh, okay, because my cousin is a principal at a local high school, and they practice lockdowns now. Something I never had to do.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, unbelievable. Okay, so so the ramifications were far-reaching and still to today. And the thing is...
it was a terrible, because obviously the end of the story is what Bush did in the Iraq War. Okay? He sent all these National Guard guys in there because he didn't know what it was like to be in the middle of a war.
Yeah.
And 5,000 of them ended up losing their lives over a threat that did not exist. The whole idea, I'm sure you're aware of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
the so-called weapons of mass destruction,
WMDs.
which there was none.
Yeah.
There were two reports issued after the war, in which there was none. Okay, and of course, I don't have to tell you what happened. Is that this was really the beginning of ISIS? Okay.
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody wants to talk about that.
Yeah.
See, the beginning of Al Qaeda. Beginning of Al Qaeda was when the United States went into Afghanistan, and one of the guys, the Muslims who went there to fight against the Russian infidel, was a guy named Osama bin Laden. All right. Well, the beginning of ISIS, which the CIA actually called at this time, Al Qaeda in Iraq, that was the name given to it first. Then when it evolved into something a little bit separate, more violent than Al Qaeda, then they called it this new name, ISIS. Yeah. So George Bush really gave us ISIS, if you want to really look at it. Okay, and by the way, I have an article at my website, Sitka, ctka.net, which addresses this issue. And it compares Kennedy's foreign policy in the Middle East with what has come after it, which is another reversal, of course.
Is there any way out through Obama's foreign policy? Is he doing the right thing, staying out of Syria, not putting...
Obama? I think Obama, I think Obama, except for Cuba, I think Obama's foreign policy has not been very good.
Okay. Hillary Clinton?
Oh, my gosh, he's even worse than he is. Okay. You know, you don't want to get into Syria. That'll take another hour.
Okay, Donald Trump? Donald Trump?
Please. Only in America. Only in America could such a thing happen.
Jim, we started out the show, I was saying I was getting a lot of emails from Americans about James Files. Now I'm getting a lot of emails about Americans claiming they're going to come to Canada if Trump is elected. I write them back right away and I say, I'm leaving the planet, baby.
If Trump gets elected, you are going to get a lot of people moving up to Canada.
And that's everybody's welcome here. There's no problem.
Right.
There's the music. Hey, thanks, Jim.
Improve your listeners.
Thank you, my friend. Merry Christmas.
Okay, good night. All right, bye.
All the best. Bye now, folks. I'm Brent Holland from Night Fright. Thank you all for listening. See you later.
Listening to Night Fright and your host, Brent Holland. The time is now. Your voice on the dark for paranormal and conspiracy.
The JFK Assassination, the definitive book by Brent Holland. From inside the Oval Office to Dealey Plaza, first-person witness accounts. Order yours right now. NightFrightShow.com.